Hello, welcome. Today we are going to have a conversation, and the conversation that we're going to have today is a conversation that sometimes we feel afraid, we don't want to talk about it. Sometimes we feel fear, we are ashamed, and we feel that we are going to be judged. And to have that conversation, we have invited to Mr. Douglas Hoyes from Hoyes, Michalos Associates. Mr. Hoyes has been a professional, insolvency professional for 30 years, and he has been a licensed insolvency trustee since 1995. So he's the author of the personal book, Straight Talk on Your Money, and he hosts a weekly podcast called Debt Free in 30. So he's a chartered accountant, licensed insolvency trustee, a chartered insolvency and restructuring professional, and certified business evaluator. So we have plenty of knowledge today to have a conversation. So welcome.
Thank you, Veronica. Great to be here.
Okay, first of all, we're going to be talking about debts. And to start talking about debts, we are going to define what is debt. Debt is money that I owe. When it comes to debt, what options of debt management do I have when I cannot pay my debts?
Well, if you have debt, my advice is to start by taking stock and say, okay, do I have a lot of debt, a little bit of debt? Is this something that I can pay off my own? So your first option is exactly that, pay it off on your own. So, maybe I've got a cell phone bill from a couple of months ago that I owe money on and I haven't been able to pay. Okay, well, it's $200 I owe. Maybe I can, come up with $50 every couple of weeks and get it paid off. So paying it off on your own is your first option. The second option would be perhaps to consolidate your debt to, get a consolidation loan to pay off higher interest rate debt. If the debt is too high and you just can't do that, then the final two options would be to do a consumer proposal or a bankruptcy, which is a more formal process where we go through and deal with your debts. I think the number one thing to start, though, is to take stock. Actually write it down. How much do I actually owe? Who do I owe it to? What are my minimum payments? Because a lot of people, when they come in to see me, they don't even know exactly how much they owe. So by writing it down, you can see what you've got, and it usually becomes pretty clear that, yeah, this is something I can handle on my own, or no, this is too big to handle. So taking stock is certainly the starting point.
We all hear these words: bankruptcy, consumer proposal, debt consolidation, and sometimes we get mixed up within the three. Can you define me the three, please?
Sure. So a debt consolidation loan is where and usually it is a debt consolidation loan. So usually that's the third word in the definition, which is where you go to a bank and say, hey, I owe money on these 3 credit cards, which I can't afford to pay because the interest rate is too high. So instead of having $5,000 owing on 3 different credit cards, where the interest rate is 20%, will you give me a consolidation loan for $15,000 where the interest rate is lower? That way more of my monthly payment is going towards the principal, less towards the interest. I can get it paid off faster. So that's really what a debt consolidation loan is. Now, there's a lot of companies that advertise debt consolidation. We're going to consolidate your debts into one monthly payment. Well, often what they're actually talking about is a consumer proposal, which is a formal legal deal. It's governed by the Bankruptcy and Insolvency Act, where you come to a licensed insolvency trustee, such as myself, and we come up with a proposal, a plan, where we go to the people you owe money to, and we say, hey, I can't afford to pay my debts in full, let's make a deal. So maybe your total unsecured debts, credit cards, bank loans, income taxes, payday loans, that sort of thing, maybe they total $50,000 or $60,000 and it's just more than I can hope to repay. Well, maybe we do a proposal where we go and we offer the creditors $20,000. I'm going to pay $300 a month, $400 a month over up to a 5-year period. That's what a consumer proposal is. Now, people get confused because they go, well, wait a minute, isn't that debt consolidation? Well, yeah, I guess you are consolidating all of your debts into one monthly payment, but it's not a loan. The money is not advanced up front. It's a deal that we make with the people you owe money to. If they don't accept that deal, or if it's not something that you can afford, then the final option would be to do a bankruptcy, which I think people understand conceptually. Well, everything gets wiped out. There are some downsides to a bankruptcy, though. It's, obviously affects your credit rating, but in a bankruptcy, you potentially lose assets, and the amount you pay while you're bankrupt is based on your income. So before deciding on any one of those options, you want to sit down with someone who understands what those different options are, like a licensed insolvency trustee, so they can explain them to you in your situation and walk you through what's going to work best for you.
And is bankruptcy the same as insolvency?
Well, insolvency means either I can't pay my debts as they come due, so it's a cash flow definition, or the asset definition, the balance sheet definition of insolvency would be my debts are bigger than my assets. So if I have $1,000 in the bank and I owe $10,000, well, on a balance sheet basis, I'm insolvent. I have more debts than assets. The typical person who comes to see us is definitely balance sheet insolvent, but they are also not able to be making their payments as they come due. My minimum payments are $1,000 a month on all my debts, and I can only afford $300 or $400. That would also be insolvent. So insolvent is not, well, bankruptcy is a legal term. So if you are insolvent, if you can't pay your debts as they come due, or if your liabilities are bigger than your assets, then you can take the next step, which is to formally file a bankruptcy or a consumer proposal. So it's a legal, bankruptcy is a legal process. Insolvency is more a state of being.
Insolvency is more, I feel distressed.
Yes, absolutely. And there are lots of people who are insolvent who are not bankrupt. They can't pay their bills, or their liabilities are higher than their assets, but that doesn't mean they are bankrupt. Bankruptcy is a formal legal process that you go through to deal with those debts.
Okay, let's say I realize I cannot pay my debts. Let's say I'm taking cash advances from one credit card to pay the other credit card. I'm taking payday loans. I can't pay it. So what will be the first step that somebody will follow in that situation?
Well, so what typically would happen once you realize the situation you're in?
You have to realize, yeah.
Yes, you have to realize. That's the first step. So, when do I call a dentist? Well, when I realize I have a toothache. If I don't realize I have a toothache, I'm not going to be reaching out for help. So I think once you realize that you have a problem, that's when you reach out to help. So you've already given a very good example of a symptom of the problem, which is I'm using a cash advance on one credit card to pay the balance owing on the other, or I'm taking a cash advance on my line of credit to pay my credit card. All you're doing is moving money from one pocket to the other. You're not actually dealing with the debt. If you look on your kitchen table and there are a bunch of envelopes that have not been opened because you don't want to see what's inside them, then again, you've probably got a debt problem. So the first step, once you realize you've got a problem, is, well, as I already said, actually write some stuff down. Who do I owe all this money to? Gather up all your statements, do it on a piece of paper, do it on a spreadsheet, whatever, and see whether or not it's doable to handle it on your own. If it isn't, then you want to reach out for help. Now in Canada, only a licensed insolvency trustee is licensed by the federal government to file a consumer proposal or a bankruptcy. And one of the conditions of our federal license is that we are required to assess your situation and provide you with all of the options. So the majority of people who call my firm, Michalos, don't end up going bankrupt. They don't end up filing a consumer proposal. Often they do end up getting a consolidation loan, or perhaps they can, revise their budget, save some expenses, and pay it off on their own. So we walk you through the options so that then you can make an informed decision as to what is the correct decision for you in your unique situation.
Okay, one question that might come to mind when dealing with bankruptcy is to start thinking, what is going to happen with my assets? If I have any property, if I have any money, how is going to be handled by creditors? Can you comment on that?
Yes, so bankruptcy law says you are allowed to keep certain stuff. So I'm not going to take your shirt when you go bankrupt. You're allowed to keep, basic clothing, basic household stuff. We're fine with that. The rules are different in each province, so I'm not going to give specific numbers. But in Ontario, for example, it says, okay, you're allowed to keep a motor vehicle that's worth up to this much. You're allowed to keep tools of the trade, things you use in your work. So if you're a carpenter, well, you're allowed to keep your hammer, for example. So most assets that the typical person has are exempt from seizure, meaning we're not going to take it. I'm not taking your couch and your chair and your household stuff and things like that. Now, if you own a fancy car with no loan against it, then yes, if you go bankrupt, you risk losing that vehicle. Of course, most people who come in to see me, they might be driving a $20,000 car, but it's got a $20,000 loan on it. So the equity in the car is zero. I'm not going to take the car. Now, you may choose to give it back to the lender because you can't afford to pay for it, but I'm not going to take it. If you own a house, for example, that has, the house is worth $800,000 and the mortgage is $300,000, well, chances are you're not going bankrupt because you could just get a mortgage or sell the house and pay it off. But if you have equity in your house, then yes, in a bankruptcy, you end up losing that equity. If you have investments, for example. So the law says that you're allowed to keep your RRSP except for whatever money you've put into it in the last year. So you can't go out, get $50,000, put it into your RSP on Monday and go bankrupt on Tuesday. That's not allowed. But if you've been contributing to your RSP for many years, whatever you've contributed in the past up to the current year, you don't lose in a bankruptcy. So there are certain rules that impact every single asset. So when you come in to meet with a licensed trustee, we go through and make a list of all your assets. We actually want to take a look at your RRSP statement so we can see, is it exempt? Is it not exempt? Any investments you have, money in a TFSA, anything like that, and we can explain to you whether or not you would lose it. Now, what will often happen is someone will come in and they'll say, well, I have this particular thing that I don't want to lose. Maybe I've contributed to my RSP in the last year. Maybe I've got some money in an RESP for one of my kids, which is not typically exempt in a bankruptcy, meaning you might lose it in a bankruptcy, but the kid's 16 years old, he's going to be going to university in a couple of years, I don't want to lose that. Okay, so then what we would do is file a consumer proposal. If we knew that you were going to lose $10,000 worth of stuff in a bankruptcy, we could file a consumer proposal. Maybe we offer the creditors $12,000 or $15,000, but over a longer period of time. So the creditors get more than what they would have gotten in the bankruptcy, so they're happy, but you're happy as well because you keep that asset and you're in effect paying it off over a longer period of time. So assets are a critical thing in a bankruptcy. We make sure we analyze them before you make any decisions, and if it's an issue, then often a consumer proposal becomes the correct option.
Sometimes people, we are afraid to take decisions because there are so many myths out there. Let's say if I go bankrupt, I'm thinking, if I ruin my credit, my spouse's credit is gonna get ruined as well, right? So are there any myths in Canada? If there are, can you mention a few?
Well, yes, the bankruptcy affects your credit report. It does not affect your spouse's credit report. So that's, people think, well, I'm married, so I guess this is going to affect my spouse as well. No, bankruptcy or a consumer proposal or any debt only impacts the person who signed for the debt. So if my wife and I go to the bank and we both sign for a loan and I go bankrupt, yes, she's going to be affected by that, but that's because she signed for it. It's not because we're married. So bankruptcy impacts the person who signed for it. Now, if I go bankrupt and a year from now, 2 years from now, my wife and I decide to buy a house, I guess I won't be a very good co-signer because there's a bankruptcy on my credit report, but that does not directly impact, that is not on her credit report. I guess the other myth is that, you lose all your stuff. Well, we already talked about that. The other myth would be, well, I'll never be able to borrow again. Well, no, a bankruptcy stays on your credit report generally for 6 or 7 years, and there's some nuances to that. A consumer proposal generally stays on your credit report for a maximum of 6 years or 3 years after the proposal is completed, whichever is shorter. But you can take steps to begin rebuilding your credit. So once the bankruptcy or the consumer proposal is finished, your debts are officially wiped out, you can then start taking steps to rebuild your credit. So going bankrupt does not mean you will never be able to buy a house again. It's just that there are steps that you need to take. it will appear on your credit report, but it's not like there's some notice in the newspaper or anything. So unless someone is looking for it or checking your credit report, they're not going to find out about it. So, and it's become, because of the level of debt that we're carrying, a more common procedure. So there are certainly a lot of people who've gone through it in the past.
Yeah. And let's say I go bankrupt, and a word that I always hear is when I'm going to be discharged. Can you tell me what discharge means? And after I go bankrupt, how long after I'm going to be getting that letter that says I am discharged?
Yeah, discharged means your debts are wiped out. Okay, so when you file a bankruptcy, your debts kind of go into this holding zone. So they're still there the day you file bankruptcy. They haven't been wiped out yet, but the creditors can't do anything about it. As soon as you file bankruptcy, and we do it electronically, we push the buttons on the computer and send them out, they can't take you to court, they can't sue you. So they're in this limbo land until you complete your duties. And once you do that, the debts are officially discharged, officially wiped out. So if it's a first bankruptcy and you don't have any what we call surplus income, you are eligible to be automatically discharged in 9 months. Now, surplus income is a concept where the government says, well, if you make a certain amount of money, then you have to make a payment while you're in your bankruptcy. It's only fair that if you're a working person making a couple of grand a month, well, then your bankruptcy is probably going to last for 9 months. But if you're a doctor or something who got into some bad real estate deal and ended up having to go bankrupt, well, he should have to pay more because his income is higher. So a first-time bankruptcy, if your income is over the limit, would last for 21 months. So 9 months plus an extra year. And if you've been bankrupt for a second time, then the periods are longer. So after that period is completed, you are officially discharged, and that's when your debts are officially wiped out. That's what discharge means.
And if I am discharged, it doesn't mean that they're going to be taking, it's still going to show my credit report, right? Because it's going to be there in my credit report for 6 years. That's how it works?
Yes. Okay. And so the 6 years, and Equifax and TransUnion do it slightly differently. It's 6 to 7 years if it's a first time bankruptcy. But yes, that time period starts from the date of your discharge. So if you go bankrupt, you want to make absolutely sure that you do everything you're supposed to do. There's paperwork that has to be filled out, a couple of credit counseling sessions that you'll attend, payments that you have to make. We have to file your taxes, things like that. So long as you do all of those things and get your discharge, then the debts are wiped out. And that's what starts that period where it's on your credit report for the 6 to 7 years.
Okay. Can you walk me through the steps that a bankruptcy follows? I'm assuming it's not just one step to a step. I'm assuming it has a series of steps, and then we have to follow, right? Because if we don't follow, then we are not going to do the paperwork the way it was supposed to be. Can you walk me through the steps that a bankruptcy follows?
Sure. So the first step is you reach out to a licensed insolvency trustee. We meet for the initial consultation, and we would, go through your whole situation. That's when we begin gathering all the documents. So we need to know, who do you owe money to? So you'd send us copies of your credit card statements, whatever else you've got. We gather your personal information. We need to know your name, your address. You'll, give us a photocopy of your passport or something with your legal name on it. So we gather up all the documents, and then it takes us 2 or 3 days to get it all typed into the computer, and we prepare the official bankruptcy paperwork, which you then sign, which is what starts the bankruptcy process off. So typically you would come in to meet with us, and we would do it in person. Although, as we've discovered in 2020 with the virus situation, we are now doing more of those things by video conference, exactly like you and I are doing right now. But regardless, you're going to meet with a licensed insolvency trustee to sign the paperwork. So when we sign the paperwork, it gets electronically filed with the Office of the Superintendent of Bankruptcy, which is a division of the federal government, and that's done immediately. So you sign the paperwork, 5 minutes later, you're officially bankrupt. And then within a few days, we send out the notice of the bankruptcy to everybody you owe money to. And then each of your creditors files a proof of claim with us saying, here's how much I'm owed. During the bankruptcy period, there's a bunch of stuff you have to do. Number one, you have to report what your income is each month. Because as I said, the more money you make, the more you have to pay. So you will send us a budget each month with, here's copies of my pay stubs so that we know how much you've earned. And we then calculate how much you have to pay based on your earnings. We have to file your taxes So you will not get your tax refund for the year of the bankruptcy or any prior years that haven't been filed. So we have to get copies of your T4 slips and so on to file that. There are 2 credit counseling sessions that you will attend as part of the bankruptcy process. And these are really designed to give you a fresh start, to give you some tools to make sure that you don't get into this situation again. We also talk about rebuilding credit, things like that. And those are the typical steps. Obviously, if there are any assets, you've got assets that we have to take over, then you would cooperate with that. But those are the typical steps. So when you go bankrupt, we lay it all out for you. Here's exactly what you need to do, when you need to do it. And assuming you do all those things in the required time period, then the bankruptcy is over. Now, anybody you owe money to has the ability to object to your bankruptcy ending. They could say, hey, wait a minute, we don't think this is fair. We think you should have to pay more money. We think there's some assets you didn't discover or something like that. So it is possible for a creditor to object to your bankruptcy ending, meaning we have to go to bankruptcy court and get the bankruptcy judge to sign off. But that is a very rare situation. And typically, if you do have a lot of assets or other issues like that, we probably would have been doing a consumer proposal anyways to avoid all of those things. But yes, a bunch of steps. We walk you through them, make sure you get them all done, and complete the bankruptcy as quickly as possible.
You mentioned in the period of bankruptcy, I attend 2 sessions, counseling sessions. Besides that, do I have any other duties? I'm assuming I'm going to have duties, right? So besides attending the counseling session, do I have any other duties that I have to comply and during that period of time?
Well, no, the submitting your budgets every month with proof of your pay, and then basically helping the trustee with whatever else we need. So providing any information, answering any questions, sending us your tax information, attending court, but that again is a very rare situation. So there aren't a lot of duties, but again, we'd spell them out for you to make sure that they were all completed well in advance of your discharge date.
When we talk about money, there are so many things that come to our mind. And what I have found, I've been in the insurance industry for 21 years. What I have found that when I explaining to people, let's say term insurance, permanent insurance, anything, they go, oh, but my sister-in-law says I have to do this. Oh, but my brother-in-law says I have to do that. When it comes to this topic, I strongly believe you have to meet with the professional, right? So can you tell me what will be the main difference or the important area that if I discover I have a debt problem, I'm gonna meet with a licensed insolvency trustee instead of going to my sister and let's say, oh, can you help me to do a plan so I can pay my debts?
Yeah, and you're right. Whatever issue you have, it is best to reach out to someone who is an expert in that issue. So if I'm trying to decide between term insurance and whole life insurance, you're not going to ask a licensed insolvency trustee. Yeah, I understand what those things are, but I'm not an expert in those things. I can't tell you what the different costs are. I can't give you a good explanation of the costs and the benefits. You want to talk to someone who has actually been doing it for 20 years, who understands and can tell you, yeah, given your age and all your circumstances, here is what it would actually cost. I mean, I could tell you in general, well, I think it costs roughly this much because 5 years ago when I got it, this is what it cost. Well, that's not really helping the person. So if you have debt problems, the one professional that again is licensed by the federal government are licensed insolvency trustees. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't go talk to your accountant or your financial planner because they have some understanding of this as well. There are a lot of not-for-profit credit counselors out there as well, who again are very good at preparing budgets and doing those sorts of things. So if you have a moderate amount of debt, if what you really need is help with a budget, reducing your spending each month, and they are perfectly good at doing that. But if you need a more robust solution, then it is only a licensed insolvency trustee who understands exactly what the process is. I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about. So let's say you've got a bunch of debts, credit cards, and you're trying to decide what you should do. And so you've heard of this thing called a consumer proposal. So you go talk to your sister and your sister says, well, yeah, I think I heard somewhere that it's like 20 cents on the dollar. That's what a consumer proposal is. okay, there are certainly consumer proposals that are 20 cents on the dollar, probably 30 cents on the dollar is a little more common. But why? Where does that number come from? Well, it's based on a bunch of things: what your assets are, how much you earn, what your entire situation is, who you owe the money to. If you owe money to Bank A, then your proposal might have to be different than Bank B because they have different requirements. Well, who's going to know what those different requirements are? Well, probably it's somebody who is dealing with those exact banks every day, day after day after day. We've got very current knowledge. So why would you not go to an expert to get an expert opinion? If I have a medical condition, I probably want to go talk to a doctor, not my sister. Now, maybe my sister has the same medical condition and could give me good advice, but why would you not go and start with an expert? It does not cost anything to sit down with a licensed insolvency trustee. In fact, the law says one of the conditions of my federal government license is I cannot charge you any money until the process has actually started, until you've actually signed the paperwork and we filed it with the government. So if you want to come in and talk to me for an hour and have me walk you through all the different scenarios, I am not allowed to charge you for that. There are no upfront fees. So if someone says, well, I'm gonna have to charge you a fee to talk to you, they are not a licensed insolvency trustee. They're probably a debt consultant. So there is zero downside to talking to an expert. There is no cost. So you might as well reach out to somebody who understands the process and can give you good, solid information that is based on your unique situation.
Mm-hmm. I would think that talking to the professional, and then you can get the right advice, and then you can take a sound decision based on what information you have now in your hands. Okay, so we are talking right now with Mr. Hoyce from Hoyce, Michalos Associates. Hoyce, Michalos Associates was founded in 1999, and the purpose of the company is to help individuals with debt problems. So another question that I have is, are there any ways to restore my credit during the bankruptcy period and afterward, as you mentioned before? Not because I'm going bankrupt now, I can never have a mortgage. One day I'm going to be able to have a mortgage loan. So during that period, are there anything that I can do on my own to help to get it better and afterward to improve my credit?
Yes, there are. The number one thing I think everyone should focus on is having some cash in their pocket, some money in the bank. So I do not believe we should obsess about our credit scores. A credit score is a marketing thing that the lenders use to decide how much money they should lend you and what interest rate they should charge you. So I think the number one thing you want to do, whether you've gone through a bankruptcy or not, is focus on yourself. What do you need? What is in your best interest? So having some money in the bank as an emergency fund, I think, is much more important than having a good credit score. Maybe exploring things like insurance. If I was to get sick, what would happen? I'm not driving my car without car insurance. Maybe there's other forms of insurance that would be good to protect me. And that's not related to your credit score at all. So look after yourself first would be my first piece of advice. Now, I understand at some point in the future, I may want to finance a car, I may want to buy a house. And so obviously the better my credit is, the better the rates I'm going to get. So yes, you can certainly start taking steps to rebuild your credit after a bankruptcy. And these are the same steps you would take to improve your credit, even if you've never gone through a bankruptcy. So number one, having cash in the bank. That doesn't appear on your credit report, but cash is nice because it allows you to then take some of the steps necessary to rebuild your credit. So for example, even while you are in a consumer proposal or a bankruptcy, it is often possible to get a secured credit card. So all your existing credit cards are gone when you file a bankruptcy, but a secured credit card is a card where you go to the credit card company and you say, here, I'm going to put $500 on deposit or $1,000 on deposit. And they give you a credit card with a $500 or $1,000 limit. It shows up on your credit report as a credit card. It doesn't say secured card, it says credit card. So you have now begun to reestablish your credit. Your credit score is based on many things. How much debt you've got. Well, once the bankruptcy's finished, your debt's wiped out. So that's going to hurt your credit report initially because you've gone bankrupt, but over time, because the debts aren't there, that's going to help it. How long have you lived at your same address? That shows stability. So if you can avoid moving around any more frequently than you need to, that will help your credit score. How long have you been at your same job? Again, that shows stability. So staying at the same job, provided it's a good job for you, is going to help your credit score. And then reestablishing credit. So you go out, you get a secured credit card because you've saved some money. Once you get that, it will be easier to qualify for an unsecured credit card. And perhaps it's a department store kind of card, or one of the non-bank types of cards that are somewhat easier to qualify for. And maybe it's got a small limit, $300, $500, something like that. But once you qualify for that, now you've got 2 brand new trade lines on your credit report, and that begins to increase your credit limit. And then perhaps after a year, you've shown that you're able to pay them in full every month while they increase your limits. You apply for increased limits. Once you get to the point where you've got a couple of different credit cards or trade lines with perhaps $2,000, $3,000 of available credit, you will find that your credit score comes up to a very decent level. And it's not like it takes 6 or 7 years, but it does take effort on your part to save money, keep your bills current, and take those active steps to begin to rebuild your credit.
Effort on my part, yeah. I had to make an effort. If I want something in the future, like I want to buy a house, now I have to make an effort right now to be able to get the house in the future. So
that's an excellent point. You have to be looking ahead to what you're trying to accomplish. So if my goal is 5 years from now, my kid is going to go to university, okay, well, I've got 5 years to plan for it. If my goal is I'd like to buy a house, okay, I'm probably not going to do it tomorrow, but I should start researching how much does it cost? How much of a down payment do I need? What are the requirements to qualify for a mortgage? Maybe I talk to a mortgage broker now just so that I understand that, so I can set the goal for myself that here's how much I need to save, but also here's what I need to do on the credit report side of things, and so that in an orderly fashion I can to work towards what my goal is.
And we as people, we need to do also our due diligence, right? We need to read, we need to meet with a professional. I was checking your website, of course, and there is so much valuable information in that website. It's unbelievable. From one page to another. There is even I believe it's a consumer proposal calculator, debt consolidation calculator. Is unbelievable. I was so fascinated. So many things that I didn't know. I was learning. I'm like, oh my goodness, this is amazing. So I will encourage my viewers, if they wanted to investigate more, they wanted to read more, go to the website, hoist.com. There is so much. Maybe right now our financial situation is fantastic. We don't have any debt problems. Maybe right now we are going through this awesome stage in our lives, but we never know, right? Times change. And then when that time change, it's good to have the information. Or let's say I hear my friend is having some problems. Maybe I can tell, oh, I was reading about this. It's good, not giving advice, but at least mentioning, oh, I was reading at this site, or I was reading in this book, you can do this. The main purpose here is to help each other and to get financially educated. And also your podcast, very good information, debt-free in 30. And I want you to clarify that. People might think debt-free in 30, after 30 minutes I'm going to be debt-free. No, right? So can you clarify me the podcast that you had, debt-free in 30?
Yeah, the name comes from 2 things. We tell people if you have debt problems and you want to come in to talk to us, give us 30 minutes. So you're right. You are not going to be debt-free at the end of 30 minutes because obviously the process takes some time. But if you give us 30 minutes up front, we can at least give you an idea of whether or not we've got a potential solution for you, and then we can take it a step further from there. My podcast itself is roughly 30 minutes in length every week. It comes out every Saturday morning, and you're right, it's debt-free in 30. You can get it on all the different podcasting apps. We've also put it on YouTube. Just again, search for debt-free in 30 podcast on YouTube, and you can see them all there. And again, I try to keep it to 30 minutes, you know, sort of like you do with what you're doing, but well, sometimes people talk more and it's longer or shorter. But I am a big believer in what you just said, and that is information is power. Knowledge is power. So I am very happy when someone calls me up and says, hey, I was on your website at hoys.com. I read through your blog. I've watched your videos. I've used your calculator. I think here's what I need to do. Great. You're already an informed person. I don't think anyone should automatically trust everything that I say. I think you should absolutely do your research. You should, talk to people, read, understand what's going on. And so that when you call me, or any one of my people, you've got very specific questions you can ask. Okay, I read this, but how does this apply to me? What's going to happen to me? So that you are making an informed decision. And now you don't have to do all that research before you call us. I'm more than happy to explain it to you when you do. But I think being informed is a good thing because it's a lot easier then to make the right decision. And that's why we spend so much time putting information on our website. We've got a new article at least once a week, a new podcast every week, lots of videos on our Hoys Michalos YouTube channel as well. And we've done a lot where we're actually explaining things. I mean, I've got one where I explain the difference between term and amortization when it comes to loans, because those are things that people go, I think I know what that means, but I'm not really sure. Well, we've got a little 1 or 2 minute video where we explain those things. So I'm a big believer in information being power, and I'm very glad that I see that you're the same as me in that respect. That's why you're recording these types of sessions with other experts, because the more information we can get out there, the better.
It's fantastic. Thank you so much. Knowing the tight schedule that you have, knowing how busy and how life has changed for us in the last 7-8 weeks, taking the time to educate, to give information, I think that's powerful. So I want to thank you for your time, and I'm sure viewers are going to find so much valuable information here. Like, I was reading and I'm like, oh, now I can ask this question. Now I can, and I'm like, no, I have to calm down because I was making more questions to ask. There is so much talking to you. There is so much I can learn and people can learn. Just go to the website, read, get financially educated, and then you can make a much better sound decision if the time comes. Hopefully those times never come, but we never know, right? We have to be prepared and we have to take action when those times come. So thank you very much for your time, and hopefully we can chat again.
Great. Thank you very much, Veronica. It was great to talk to you.
I believe we all got fantastic information with Mr. Hoys. As I mentioned before, Mr. Hoys has been a licensed insolvency trustee since 1995, and he's the co-founder of Michalos Associates, a very well-known company that has helped individuals to deal with debt problems. The purpose now is, if you are in a situation where you need help, if you are in a situation where you have questions, don't just sit around, right? You just go and look for the help. You start reading, you start making calls, you start finding out what can you do, because the longer you let it go, the harder it's gonna get to be out of that situation. And as Mr. Hoys mentioned, because you are going bankrupt, consumer proposal, it doesn't mean that in the future you cannot get along. The only thing that it means is that you are taking a step forward. You are moving ahead with your financial situation, and one day you're going to be able to buy that house. So it was fantastic. The information that we got from Mr. Hoys, I think, is very valuable. And the website, hoys.com, I'm going to put the link at the bottom so you can see it, and then you can go and find out. In that website, I was on the weekend on the website. There is so much you can learn. There is so much. There are definitions about bankruptcy, debt consolidation, consumer proposal. There is even a calculator. If you have so much debt, how much the monthly payment is going to be. There are podcasts. There is so much we can learn. The whole weekend wasn't enough for me to learn, right? So I'm going to encourage my viewers to learn. And thank you so much for watching this video. And hopefully during these times, we're all going to make it. But it's a matter of working a little bit harder, but we're all going to make it. And hopefully you can join me in the next video. Thank you.